Inviting me to talk. So in this presentation, I will explore an extremely popular genre of YouTube video known as ASMR roleplay videos, in which the YouTuber creates a fictive scenario in order to invoke pleasurable sensations in the viewer, resulting from the kinds of sounds and visual features they produce. So basically, the YouTuber is creating different kinds of visual and oral features that invoke these kinds of pleasurable sensations in the ambient audience. So I'll be focusing on how ambient embodied co-presence is created through the use of particular visual and oral choices in the videos. I'll focus on a particular YouTuber known as Gentle Whispering ASMR, and she's one of the most successful ASMR artists. She has about 1.9 million followers currently, and I think she's had over 773 million views. Sorry, I'm just closing my study door. So I'll start with a background on ASMR. What exactly is it? So the experience of ASMR is created through positive sensory reaction to certain oral or visual stimuli, as I mentioned, such as whispering, crinkling, tapping sounds, or repetitive flowing hand movements. So to unpack the acronym, autonomous means that the individual possesses the ability to facilitate or produce the sensation at will. Okay, so it's something that's happening in your brain. Sensory refers to the transmission of information through the nervous system and brain in response to an external trigger. So that's the visual or oral stimulus that I mentioned earlier. And the individual's simultaneous perception of this feedback with the senses. And meridian refers to this kind of apex, this euphoric sensation that the person feels. So ASMR has various triggers, or is triggered by various phenomena. So these are visual or oral stimuli that induce these sensations in the person, in their brain, creating this kind of tingling feeling. Kind of like your hair standing on end when you've had a really nice massage, that kind of really pleasant feeling. The triggers are usually auditory, resulting from acts such as I mentioned, tapping, crinkling, whispering, these kinds of phenomena, touching different kinds of materials, speaking with a calming voice quality. And they can also include visual triggers. So as I mentioned, hand movements, brushing or tracing motions, often in the foreground of the filmed visual field. For example, here's an instance from Gentle Whispering ASMR's videos, where she is using both visual and oral strategies to invoke ASMR in the ambient viewer. So hopefully this will work.
I know. Isn't that interesting? You're watching me creating movements. Could give you a little tingling sensation. Could not. But nonetheless, it's pleasant. Why is it pleasant? What do you think? You think it's just relaxing for you? You think you are seeking this? How do you feel right now?
Okay, so you would have noticed there the whispering voice, the soft voice quality, and the movement of her hands around the visual field.
I know.
So reactions to triggers are described as by viewers as these pleasant physical sensations. So here's an example from a comment from one of her videos. This video is one of my favorites. Her soft speaking is pretty much the only that makes me tingle. I usually only get ASMR from whispers. She's just such a gentle human being. It really translates through the screen and makes me feel all warm inside. So it just evokes this pleasant feeling. ASMR videos are often produced using these really cool binaural microphones. which are designed to be listened to through headphones so that you experience the sensation in both of your ears. So it sounds like the sounds that the YouTuber is producing in your ears, around your ears, behind or in front. So binaural sound is a form of headphoned targeted audio that aims to reproduce accurately the acoustic properties, the space in which it was recorded, therefore situating the listener at the site of the audio capture. And this is kind of critical to invoking this kind of ASMR sensation. ASMR listening may in fact have certain health benefits. It may be associated with easing symptoms of chronic illness, such as mental illness, insomnia, and stress. And a lot of people will watch these kinds of videos before they go to sleep. One of the few surveys about the experience of ASMR involving 475 participants found that having close personal attention paid to them was a trigger for 69% of participants. So this is suggestive that some kind of interpersonal intimacy is associated with invoking ASMR. So the particular genre of ASMR video that we will be focusing on today is the ASMR roleplay. These videos draw on a range of multimodal resources to simulate dialogic interaction. And the affordances of the video platform mean that these, what are in effect one-sided role plays, because the YouTuber and the audience are not actually interacting. These one-sided role plays draw upon the kind of creative strategies that the YouTuber uses to suggest the participation of the viewer, of the ambient viewer, as if they are there, as if they are an embodied presence in the interaction. And it's these visual and oral strategies that we will focus on today. So the simulated interaction can be personal, such as chatting with a friend or partner, or more institutionalized, such as service encounters with hairdressers, going a service encounter in a shop, a beauty therapy visit, visiting the doctor, etc. Encounters usually involve some form of performed care, expert assistance, or affirmation, and occur in what Gallagher terms tones of hushed solicitude. The doctor's visit, or the one-sided simulation of a clinician's physical exam, is a particularly popular conceit, and I guess it reminds us of playing doctors and nurses when we were little. It provides a kind of a natural confluence point in terms of jargon, scrutiny, and personal contact. These three things coming in together seem to be particularly ASMR invoking for many people. So coming to the data set that I was working with of personal attention roleplay videos. So as I mentioned, the channel is Gentle Whispering ASMR. And these personal attention roleplay videos address the ambient viewer with expressions of care, interest, and affirmation, with the aim of creating an immersive scenario that constructs the ambient viewer as co-present in the fictional scenario, be that, close shave, so the example at the top, or, Marilyn Monroe doing your makeup. They achieve this through using visual and oral strategies that create a sense of ambient and body co-presence, as we're going to look at today. That is, they invoke or represent the visual oral perspective of the ambient viewer in various ways that we will explore. Okay. So the dataset consisted of the entire playlist from this channel, 116 videos in a playlist that she titled herself Relaxing ASMR Roleplay Personal Attention Videos. So she's classified these and included a large range of scenarios, such as picking out a decorative mask, that's the example there, having hair and makeup done, choosing jewelry, or visiting a dream lab. So let's look now at an example from the beauty domain in which the YouTuber is presenting herself as a beautician, doing facial exfoliation. Okay.
Hello, welcome to this ASMR exfoliation session. I'm gonna take care of your beautiful face today. Yes, promise you to be very gentle and help your skin to become more smooth, more elastic. Yes, there are definitely things that should be more of a ritual. If you want to protect your skin, make it healthy and youthful all the time. Of course, the big thing is to hydrate properly and the type of food that you intake. So lots of fruits and vegetables and water. Yeah.
So moving to the sampling strategy that I used, due to the complexity of the multimodal analysis undertaken, a grounded theory approach was used for sampling. So this basically meant iteratively sampling until saturation for a particular visual or oral feature was achieved. The aim of this sampling strategy was to enable a description of these features through which ambient embodied co-presence was constructed via representation of the ambient viewer's visual or oral perspective in the videos, and through representation of their embodiment and aspects of the fictive situational context. So multimodal transcription, as many of us will know, is really difficult, and multimodal discourse analysis is very challenging. Multimodal transcription and analysis involves some really difficult theoretical and practical decisions for determining what should be transcribed and how. Transcription is itself necessarily theory-bound and dependent on the theoretical orientation that we bring to the data and on the question that we're asking about the data. Linguistic and multimodal data also has really high dimensionality. This means that it can be approached simultaneously from multiple valid directions in terms of both theory and in terms of analysis. So to manage this complexity, researchers have favoured annotation involving multiple tiers of analysis that allow connections between intermodal connections between different tiers to be perceived. In addition, coupling of features across modes, across semiotic modes, are not necessarily one-to-one, and it can incorporate different kinds of temporal and semantic associations across tiers of analysis. So my focus was on the largely on the visual and oral resources involved in construing ambient embodied co-presence across linguistic, oral and visual tiers. So in terms of language, I was interested in language used to invoke the ambient viewer's perspective and their embodiment. In terms of oral choices or oral resources, the kinds of sonic resources used to invoke the ambient viewer's oral perspective and embodiment, and similarly for visual choices, how gestures in relation to the visual frame were used to invoke the ambient viewer's visual perspective and embodiment. So this will make a little bit more sense as we go through some examples. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit about co-presence and intersubjectivity. So let's look a little more closely at what is meant by co-presence and the relationship that it has to intersubjective perspective, both visually and orally realised. So co-presence can be defined as forging a sense of being with others. This can involve mutual entrainment with the attention, emotion and behaviour of others, And it's usually traced to Goffman's ideas about being accessible, available, and subject to one another in face-to-face interactions or proximate interactions. Early work tended to be concerned with the degree of salience of the other person in the proximate interaction, and the relation between people in the same physical space. But as work expanded into non-face-to-face and digital environments, in terms of digital interaction, increased dimensions beyond physical proximity needed to be accounted for. So early work by Lombard and, I don't know how to pronounce it, Ditton maybe, defined co-presence, which they referred to as presence, as the perceptual illusion of non-mediation. So this kind of sense of immersion in the context, that you don't notice the mediation. But more recent work has tended to focus on co-presence as a form of intimacy. And there's been a concentration of work, for instance, in the area of looking at polymedia environments, looking at, for example, how transnational families in these environments negotiate co-presence as feelings of togetherness, emotional proximity and support as they use various kinds of digital technologies. Another context in which co-presence has been important is in gaming, where haptic effects, for instance, are used to generate a sense of collective affinity, or as a form of affective resonance, where people share embodied experiences, for example, via apps such as Pokemon Go, that create an empathetic resonance between bodies. But with the advent of social media platforms and various kinds of apps for facilitating online connection and interaction, we're currently witnessing the appearance of new types of co-present visuality and sociality that draw on discursive practices of what I refer to as ambient affiliation, so bonding, social bonding online, through which people create different kinds of alignments, enact identities, and form or contest communities and different positions. This co-presence allows people to enact forms of digital intimacy. That is, the dimension of affiliation concerned with closeness and sharing, but also relying on representing subjective perspectives, as we will see. So I'm really fascinated by how this kind of thing is construed visually. I've done some really fun work with Zhu-Min Zhao, looking at intersubjective positioning in selfies through looking at visual perspective, looking at how the intersubjective positioning of forms of what we refer to as inferred selfies feature a visual structure that includes, body parts. So you see the hand, the photographer's hand or feet, or other body parts in the image, and how this can be used to create co-presence that is then recontextualized across different domains of social life, as suggested by the hashtags, teacher life, mum life, travel life, of these Instagram images. I've also looked at visual structures in YouTube vlogs that present the vlogger's perspective using point of view shots that allow the viewer to view their personal objects from an intimate kind of perspective, or present that relation to the viewer. And point of view is a filmic technique where the camera assumes the position of a subject in order to show us what the subject sees, and they're often used, for instance, in tutorial videos on YouTube. So moving now to look at oral perspective. Let's start with this as it plays out in ASMR roleplay videos. So the soft spoken or whispered voice. All the roleplay videos in my data set employed a soft spoken voice, or a spoken voice quality that ranged from soft spoken to a complete whisper. This voice quality utilized a lower pitch and volume that would be then that would be found in more public settings that tend towards a higher, as Van Leeuwen noticed, a higher and tenser projected voice. So in terms of choices in voice quality that are proposed by Van Leeuwen, the YouTuber tended, in my data set, towards a lax rather than tense voice that was soft, low, smooth, and breathy, and a non-nasal and plain voice quality rather than a vibrato voice quality. The soft-spoken voice adopted by the YouTuber enacted two main functions. A function of enhancing the sensory pleasure of the ambient viewer, so that ASMR sensation, for whom this voice quality would likely invoke those ASMR sensations by virtue of being a trigger. And also forging intimacy with the ambient audience. So in accord with Van Leeuwen's linking of voice quality with parameters of social distance in multimodal text. So he notes that the loud voice carries furthest and claims most territory. The soft voice, on the other hand, excludes all others and can therefore become associated with intimacy and confidentiality. So choices in oral perspective, according to Van Leeuwen's framework, divide simultaneous sounds into groups and place these groups at different distances from the listener, so as to make the listener relate to them in different ways. The ASMR videos in the dataset tended to foreground the voice of the YouTuber, the whispered voice, as a figure against the background, which was background noises. So they treated it as it's treated as the most important sound, the sound which the listener must identify with and/or react to and act upon. So this choice tended to couple with the intimate social distance, with intimate social distance, foregrounding a private closeness that's being ambiently construed. So I've shown this on Van Leeuwen's network in the particular choices that were made in grey. So this system network shows these two simultaneous choices of perspectival sound with the voice foregrounded as figure and the whispered voice construing an intimate social distance. These choices come together to generate the intimate relation between the YouTuber and the ambient audience. So in the dataset, there's heightened intimacy is construed through the intimate whispered voice foregrounded as figure. So, for example, in a sensory role-play video, the YouTuber's soft-spoken voice construes an intimate social distance that is echoed in her verbiage, where she explicitly refers to the close connection she's attempting to forge with the ambient viewer. So as she says, "So we are bonding, you and me."
So we are bonding, you and me.
So I'm not sure if that played properly.
So we are bonding, you and me.
There's a little bit of lag, I think. Okay. So now let us turn to how the fictive context conceit is created by the YouTuber, since it is important for enabling the ambient interaction to be performed. So it has to be performed in an interactive, fictive interactual context. And this context provides the semiotic space in which the interaction can be represented. So for instance, this is an interaction with a sassy witch. So the fictive or the faux context, if you want to call it, that the video realizes provides both a visual and oral semiotic environment in which the ambient and body co-presence with the viewer can occur. So for example, in this video, the scenario is a visit with a witch with a sassy personality, and she's complete with a background, makeup and costumes aimed at evoking a fantasy interaction. And the kinds of contexts that could be construed spanned three main types of portrayed personal and institutional interaction. So there could be service encounters, for instance, shopping, interaction with a doctor, bank teller interaction, more casual interaction. This is where I would position the sassy witch fantasy interaction, or it might be interaction with the YouTuber playing the role of a friend, or they could be more sensory kind of focused. There's still an interaction with the YouTuber, but they're focused on things like hair brushing or other forms of sensory experience. So the videos typically begin with the YouTuber establishing the tenor of the interpersonal relationship being performed. For instance, as the examples here on the right show, in a dental cleaning visit, a natural visit, a bank visit, or a massage session. So the YouTuber will say things like, welcome back, hello sweetheart, good evening, welcome, etc. Greeting the ambient viewer. And also acknowledging their embodied presence. For example, via they'll greet them with perhaps a vocative, and then combine this with direct gaze towards their eye level or their represented eye level. The representation of the faux interactivity is enhanced by using resources such as pausing after questions. The YouTuber might ask the ambient viewer something, pause as if they're going to respond, and then move on. They might also provide generalized follow-ups, for example, the in the first example there, in example 1 from the dental cleaning visit. These have to be underspecified enough to fit in with whatever the ambient viewer might be imagining is their response, so they can't be too specific. It's also embellished by the YouTuber acknowledging the interactive co-presence of the ambient viewer, for instance, by referencing their physical embodiment, by identifying parts or qualities of their body, for example, in instance 4 in the massage session, talking about your hair, your skin, your ears. So the linguist choices that I've just mentioned, coupled with the visual and oral choices that invoke the viewer's ambient presence in the interactional context. And this context can be portrayed through objects and background features in keeping with the fictive scenario. For example, a bank teller visit featuring a desk and files and the YouTuber dressed in office attire.
Good evening. Welcome to our bank team. My name is Maria. I'm going to be helping you tonight. Yes, nice to meet you too. So I know that you have an appointment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Videos may also feature close-up visual framing that can be used to keep the focus on the relationship between the YouTuber and the ambient viewer, in turn fostering a sense of intimacy and directed attention.
Good evening. Thank you so much for joining me yet again for another ASMR evening. Tonight, I would like to do something that I don't do often, but I hope to do more, and that is brushing and gentle touches on your hair, your skin, your ears. May I? Press your ears ever so gently, if you don't mind.
So role-play videos will often include verbal requests for information or permission directed at the ambient viewer. that emphasize that what is being performed is intended to be viewed as an interaction, even if it really isn't an actual real-life interaction. For example, in sensory role videos, YouTubers will often ask for permission to touch part of the viewer's body before simulating the action in the video. So now that we've established how the interactional context is construed, let's look at how the ambient viewer's imagined visual perspective is represented within the scenario that has been established. So many videos in the dataset include objects that are placed over the visual frame to simulate the ambient viewer's visual perspective on the action that is being represented. For example, in this video, the YouTuber is tucking the ambient viewer into bed and places the blanket at the foreground of the visual frame to suggest this action, while commenting on the feeling of the blanket against the viewer's skin and asking whether they like it. The positioning of the object in this way couples with the sound of the blanket being rubbed against the microphone, both to create the sense that it is touching the viewer and to produce a noise that will act as a trigger, invoking ASMR in some people.
Okay, sure. Covered up onto that. You like this feeling of flush around your teeth? It is so soft. It just feels like, I don't know, like you're rubbing your cheek on a kitten's tummy. It is so pleasant. Cozy wrapped in a blanket.
Another example is a video where the YouTuber is performing the role of a beautician and is representing the action of placing a gel pack on the ambient viewer's face by placing it in the foreground and around the edges of the visual field as if they're placing it over the viewer's face.
And now to the rest of it. And you already feel warm.
Items can also be positioned on screen to give the impression that they're worn on the body of the viewer. For example, in this scenario, the YouTuber is dressing the ambient viewer, who is portrayed as an astronaut about to embark on a space mission. She's lowering the helmet over their head, and this is represented by a clear object moving over the visual field.
I'm going to put it over your head, okay? Try not to press against your ears too much. How's this?
The YouTuber may also cover the periphery of the visual frame with their hands to suggest touching the ambient viewer's face in coordination with touching the binaural microphone, which will create the sensation of the sounds in parts of the viewer's ears that correspond to the position depicted on the screen. And for many people, sound and gestures alternating from side to side seem to enhance ASMR feelings. So many viewers will engage in this kind of alternating side-to-side performance.
So we are fine.
That one's stalled. Another way in which the ambient viewer's visual perspective can be represented is through the orientation of the objects relative to the foreground of the visual frame. For example, this video I'm about to show you is a tea tasting video in which the YouTuber is inviting the viewer to smell the tea, which she positions to the front of the visual field as if offering it to the viewer.
Wonderful. Now your turn. Same way. Breathe out.
In other videos, the YouTuber will hold objects such as books books and magazines towards the screen and will make deft gestures towards relevant parts. For example, this video is a faux interaction with a house decorator who is helping the viewer pick out paint colours. The book of colours is oriented towards the viewer as the YouTuber points out choices.
See the difference between the flat surface and the forward going surface.
These roleplay videos not only represent the ambient viewer's imagined visual and oral perspective, but they also draw on particular semiotic strategies to invoke the ambient viewer's corporeality, their embodiment. ASMR videos tend to be focused on bodily sensations and on creating a feeling in the ambient viewer that they are physically experiencing the roleplay scenario constructed. This is part of creating conditions for experiencing ASMR sensations. The visual and oral resources used to construe the ambient viewer's embodiment are particularly important in enhancing or in enacting the social function of the video, whereby the ambient viewer becomes lost in the perceptual illusion of non-mediation. So remember that I mentioned that at the beginning of the presentation. In this section, we will explore how the co-occurrence of gesture and sound are used to invoke the bodily experience of the ambient viewer, or rather the fictive representation of that experience. So the roleplay videos tend to make use of binaural sounds, as I've mentioned, and are designed to be listened to with headphones on, so that you experience the sound emanating from the parts of your body that correspond to what is visually represented in the video. Close-up gestures performed in the foreground of the visual frame, together with audio recorded to sound like it's emanating from the same area, are used to create this kind of sensation.
Press your ears ever so gently, if you don't mind.
For example, in beauty consultation roleplay videos, the YouTuber will often brush the front of the visual field with an object, such as a makeup brush, as if they are applying makeup to different zones in the ambient viewer's face.
Just put it all over. And another couple.
Some videos will also include props designed to simulate parts of the ambient viewer's body, and in this way more explicitly represent the viewer's imagined body in the video. For example, this is a massage roleplay video that includes fake legs underneath a blanket as a prop to suggest the ambient viewer's legs. The YouTuber interacts with this prop, massaging it. Other potential props include, fake hair at the periphery of the visual frame in hairdressing scenarios. So let's summarise what we've covered. We've explored how detailed multimodal analysis of linguistic, visual and oral features can be used to understand how digital intimacy can be construed in YouTube videos through resources of ambient bodied co-presence. 3 key dimensions of the performance were explored: the construction of the interactive context in which the ambient co-presence is situated, the construction of the ambient viewer's visual and oral perspective, and the construction of the ambient viewer's simulated bodily corporeality. In each case, the co-presence can either be inferred through the visual and oral location or orientation of the objects, gestures and sounds, or directly represented via a prop or other performative element. Okay, so we've seen the ambient viewer's perspective inferred through the location of sounds on objects in the oral or visual field. We've seen their corporeality inferred through location and gesture and sound and direction. And we've seen it represented, for example, through a prop. And we're seeing the interactional context construed, directly represented through domain-specific props, backgrounds, and costumes. So I find these videos fascinating. The ambient and body co-presence explored, that we've explored in this roleplay video dataset is particularly interesting when we consider just how deftly these videos manage intersubjective positioning and perspective. The videos perform a representation of an intersubjective relation. They represent the YouTuber's perspective on the ambient viewer's perspective on their simulated interaction with the YouTuber. The visual and oral choices that we have explored open up a possibility for ambient viewers to occupy the visual and oral perspectives that are engendered. It is this possibility that enables the ambient viewer to share in the experience of sensory enjoyment, to experience ASMR and ambient intimacy. And such intersubjective flexibility is necessary if the actual viewer of the video is to be able to imagine themselves into the scenario, into the role play, as the recipient of the personal attention. So thus these videos must perform the difficult work of both constructing a sense of embodiment at the same time as moving beyond any individual's actual body. Both processes must be simultaneously enacted in order to construct the ambient co-presence so essential to the function of these videos. So if you're interested in reading more about what I've talked about today, a paper on this is just coming out in Visual Communication. And thank you for listening, and perhaps, I don't know, as a warm-up exercise, we could conduct a poll on, have you felt ASMR? I can remember feeling it as a child, listening to a woman's voice and experiencing that kind of tingling feeling. But I don't know how common it is, but I'm interested to hear how many of us linguists and multimodalists experience ASMR.